Hey there, it's the Coaster Phone, and I'm making my first video in quite a while. It's my review and experience at one of my bucket list parks, Six Flags Magic Mountain. With my home park being Cedar Point, I've been wanting to visit Magic Mountain for quite a while to see how they compare, because in sheer numbers of coasters, well, no other park does compare. But obviously, I wanted to see how the full experience stacks up. And spoiler alert, there was a lot that surprised me about this park. I had certain expectations based on what others have said, and my experience on certain rides and with the park overall was a lot different than what I was expecting. Before I get into the video, I just want to say that if you like something you see here today, to please hit the like button. And if you're interested in seeing more, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell so that these videos will come right to you. All of that will help the channel grow. So my plan was to spend 3 days at Magic Mountain. February 16th, which was a Sunday, February 17th, which was a Monday and also President's Day, and then February 18th, which was a Tuesday during the off season that I thought would be completely dead. I chose to fly into the small Burbank Airport instead of LAX because I freaking hate LAX. And the trip from the Burbank Airport up to the park took about half an hour. No headache, no traffic like you would encounter at LAX. So if you're flying in to visit Magic Mountain, I highly recommend flying into the Burbank Airport. On Sunday the 16th, I arrived at the park about 3 hours after it had already opened, and it was packed as expected. The front gate is in need of major upgrade, as it looks like a prison. But once you enter the park, it's pretty nice. You are greeted with a fountain and Revolution's Loop, and it made for a very nice first impression. Overall, except for a couple things, I thought it was a very nice looking park. Not beautiful like Busch Gardens or Dollywood, and maybe not as nice as a Cedar Fair park, but nice enough. I think Six Flags parks in general get a lot of unnecessary criticism for their appearance, or lack thereof. But as long as the park is pleasant looking and not ugly or unkempt, that's good enough for me. And Magic Mountain is definitely a pleasant looking park. So my plan for day one was to knock out the coasters with the shortest lines. And on the app it said Superman was a 20-minute wait. So I made my way up the ridiculous pathway to that coaster, which is a workout because it's uphill. Here was my first reaction to climbing the hill to Superman. Okay, I think I figured out why on this busy day, Sunday, there's only a 20-minute wait for Superman. It's because you gotta actually climb a freaking mountain to get to the dang thing. If I sound like I'm tired and out of breath, I am. That was a climb from hell. Holy crap. See why they call it Magic Mountain now. So not only did I almost die trying to get there, I didn't even get on the ride because it was down. Thanks, Intamin. So I walked down the hill to the park's mine train, Gold Rusher. And this was my first coaster of 2020. What a way to start off the year. I liked how it hugged the hilly terrain, but at the end of the day, it was a below average mine train, but still pretty fun, not rough, and no major complaints. I have 6 tiers that I rank coasters based on. They are elite, great, good, fun, okay, and then bad. I would rank Gold Rusher as okay. It was pretty smooth and parts were fun, but at the end of the day, it's just a mine train. Then I made my way over to Viper, the park's Aero Looper, and I was pleasantly surprised at how smooth and fun this ride was. There were a couple rough spots, but nothing too bad. It was smooth overall, pretty intense, and a long ride. Viper is one of the best aero loopers I've been on, and definitely belongs in the fun tier. I can't put it in the good tier because it's still only an aero looper, but it's one of the best. Actually, my second favorite after Tennessee Tornado. Then came Apocalypse, and I didn't have high expectations because overall I'm not a fan of Woodies. I just think that most are too rough, but this one was pretty smooth. I also thought it kept a pretty good pace, but it didn't do anything that made the ride all that intense. Nor did it have any great forces or laterals. So because it had good pacing and was smooth, I put it in the fun tier. Because the park was so busy, I only got one more ride for the day, and that was Superman Escape from Krypton. Yes, I climbed back up that hill. I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but those expectations were freaking shattered. Others have said that the launch is too gradual, but I thought it was a blast. Some people say that the ride is too short, but if a ride is going to be short, then it had better pack a punch in that short amount of time, and this definitely did. It wasn't an elite level launch, but it was intense, and doing it backwards was something different for me, which definitely made it extremely fun. Superman is certainly a coaster that belongs in the good tier. Day 2 was President's Day, and it may have been busier than the day before. I mean, freaking Gold Rusher had an hour wait at one point. But before the park became swamped with people, I was able to get on a few of the star attractions. At Rope Drop, I headed straight for Full Throttle and waited 5 minutes for a front row ride. Like I said about Superman, if the ride is going to be short, it had better pack a punch, and this also did that. The launch is good. The first loop is freaking amazing. I mean, the hang time is just unreal. The only negative thing about it is the brakes on the final drop. They're kind of a buzzkill, as they really thrusted me forward, which kind of hurt. But overall, it was a very fun coaster that I re-rode several times during my visit, definitely in the good category. Now it was time for the coaster that's at the very top of my bucket list. X freaking 2. I'm a real big fan of the S&S 4D coasters, so my expectations were sky high for this ride. For my first ride, I was on the back row on the inside seat. Once I was strapped in, I didn't think it was going to be a comfortable experience because, well, my junk was pinned tight against the leg separating thing. And as they rotated the seat back, it completely destroyed my, quote, area. And while going up the lift hill, all I could think about was how I don't have any children yet, that I know of. And that maybe this is a sign from the heavens, telling me that I shouldn't be reproducing. Then the train crests over the lift hill, which flips you looking straight down while going down the drop. One of the best drops that I have ever experienced. I mean, look at that. Wow. But the rest of the layout was a little, well, underwhelming. When you're flipping, it's really fun. But when you're not flipping, it's just kind of boring. I really liked the ride, but it didn't live up to the hype intensity-wise. I thought there would be more flips, and I thought it would be a different experience with every new ride, like the S&S 4D coasters are. I thought it was comfortable, with the exception of banging my head really hard on the final flip, but I learned that if you keep your head forward, you won't bump it. Overall, it's in the good tier, but I was expecting elite, and it just wasn't. It wasn't even a great ride in my opinion, but I still liked it. It's still a fun ride, one of the best rides in the park. Next, I made my way over to Goliath, the park's hypercoaster, and this was the biggest surprise of the park for me. I was not expecting much because people have called it a giant mine train, but I loved it. If you're someone who loves airtime, I can see why you wouldn't like it because, well, there isn't any airtime. But I thought it pulled a lot of positive G's, thus making it pretty intense. I also thought that the mid-course brake run would destroy the pacing, but it didn't. Right after the brake run, it picked up right where it left off. Goliath absolutely blew away my expectations. This is definitely a ride that belongs in the good tier. By now the park was absolutely packed and Batman only had half an hour wait. It's obviously a clone, but it's definitely a good ride. All of the Batman clones, including this one obviously, are pretty intense, very whippy, solidly in the good tier. Next was Riddler's Revenge, and I despise stand-up coasters for obvious reasons, but I've heard this is the best one, so I got on. But it definitely reminded me why I hate them so much. Just too uncomfortable in the area between the legs. Bad tier. But it wasn't like that was unexpected. Then I waited a good hour and a half for West Coast Racers, and it totally exceeded expectations. Some have referred to this as a family coaster, and if it is, it's the best one ever. The launches are pretty intense and forceful, and the pit stop in the middle of the ride isn't as big of a buzzkill as I thought it might be. It would be better if there was maybe some more theming going on during that stop, but overall it's fine. I also enjoyed the queue, learning about West Coast customs. Definitely a good tier coaster. Ninja, the Aero suspended coaster, had been down for most of the day, but luckily it opened up right as I was walking by. This is another coaster that shattered my expectations. I was expecting it to be one of the best Aero suspended coasters, if not the best, and it was, but I was not expecting it to be that freaking good. It's so good that I think it is one of the top 5 coasters in the entire park. It's a long ride, it feels faster than it is, and it's surprisingly forceful. I was able to get 3 rides in with no wait before the rest of the park figured out it was open. Definitely a coaster that I would put in the good category, and a great way to end day number 2. At the start of day 3, I still needed 4 credits, and as expected, the park was dead. So I was able to get them, and many more re-rides on my favorites. I started with Revolution, which had a ridiculous line the past 2 days because it was on one train freaking ops. It was smooth and the loop was fun, but other than that, it just kind of meanders around. But for an old coaster, it was fun, and definitely in the fun tier. Next was Tatsu, and going in, my expectations were low, because I just despise flying coasters. The restraints for me are incredibly uncomfortable, and Tatsu was no different. I knew I would hate it, and well, I did. But for those who enjoy flying coasters, I can see how this would rate really high. For me though, it's in the bad category, because it's just too uncomfortable. After that, I made my way over to the second most anticipated ride in the park, the RMC Twisted Colossus. Now this park has been a little strange, with certain coasters exceeding expectations and others not living up to expectations. This was not the issue with Twisted Colossus. I was expecting a great tier coaster, and that's exactly what it is. It was exactly what you would expect from an RMC. A ton of airtime, intense, and overall, a very fun ride. The stall on the green side is my favorite element, especially when the ride duels, which unfortunately it didn't for the most part. Of my 12 rides, I only got half of a duel. The last credit I needed was Scream, and you know that saying, save the best for last? Yeah, well, this was quite the opposite. This ride is complete trash, and definitely the worst coaster I've ever been on from B&M that isn't a stand-up or a flying coaster. It was very rough all the way through, from beginning to end, and it sits firmly in the bad category. Aside from the coasters, I did 2 flats, Crazanity and Lex Luthor the Drop Tower that's built into Superman. Crazanity was not fun because the restraints just broke my clavicle. And Lex Luthor wasn't that great either because the drop was kind of controlled and it didn't really give that free fall feeling. Something else I have to mention was the very poor selection of merchandise. It was very slim picking. I couldn't find a Twisted Colossus shirt or even a decent shirt that just said Magic Mountain on it. Almost all of the merchandise was superhero related, and that's just not my style. Here I was, ready to empty my wallet into their cash register, but there wasn't anything worth buying. I was pretty disappointed about that. Overall, I had a great time visiting the park. The strength of this park is obviously the overall quantity of coasters, and the vast majority are in the fun and good tiers. A weakness, though, is that, in my opinion, they don't have any elite coasters and only one great coaster. So finally, getting to the comparison to Cedar Point. There really isn't one. Magic Mountain is a good tier park, but they just don't have the quality of coasters, in my opinion, to compete with Cedar Point. But I definitely had a good time, and Magic Mountain is definitely worth making a visit to. And I hope to be back sooner rather than later. Okay, thanks for watching, and make sure to be on the lookout for more of my videos, especially part 2 of my SoCal trip at Knott's Berry Farm. That's it from me, the Coaster Cafone. Ciao.